I feel like I nailed that.
That's great.
I mean.
That's great.
That was fun.
I mean.
I mean,
Can you even, Andrea? I didn't stutter or ramble.
You knew exactly what you were talking
I
about.
was going towards the finish line. Hi everyone, I'm Gertie and welcome to our third Fit Clinic here on Patreon. I'm very excited about our topic today. It's a little bit different from the last two Fit Clinics we've done. Today's topic is one that you've requested, and we are going to be talking about how fabric choices affect the fit of your sewn garments. And I'm super excited about this one because it's a question that we get all the time. Can I change up the fabric for this garment? Can I use a knit instead of a woven? Etc. And I feel like it's one of those factors in sewing that affects the fit of the garment so much more than people realize. So what we're doing today is a little sort of science lab type experiment where we've taken one pattern. We're going to be using the Bryant gown from Charm Patterns, and we've sewn it in 4 different fabrics so that you can see how much things like fabric type, stretch percentage, and drape versus body in a fabric really affect the finished outcome and fit of the garment. But first, we are going to go on a little Textiles 101 tour. So if you're not even sure what I'm talking about with these terms, we're all going to get on the same page, looking at things like why are fabrics called what they're called, knits versus wovens, stretch percentage, drape versus body, and more. So I'm very excited about today. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and I hope that it teaches you a lot about how you can affect the fit of your garment before you even start sewing or making a muslin by choosing the right fabric. Okay, so one thing to know before we even get started is that we always give you a list of recommended fabrics in your sewing pattern, right? So what we're going to be talking about today is why do we choose those recommended fabrics, and when might it be appropriate to veer away from those choices, and when is it not a great idea? And further, how are the choices you make going to affect the way the garment looks on your body and the way the garment fits? So this is a really fun topic. I hope that you love it, and I hope that it teaches you a lot about how you can manipulate the fit of your garment with the right textile choices. So let's go ahead and get started. So when you go to choose a fabric, it's not just thinking about like how casual or how fancy do you want your garment to look. It's about how closely does the fabric match the pattern recommendations for what you should make the garment in. And the reason for that is that when we draft a pattern here at Charm, we're talking about the fabric that we're intending to make it in before any drafting starts. Okay, so is it a woven, a stretch woven? Is it a knit? Like, we're having those conversations down to how much stretch percentage is this garment intended to have before anything is even drafted. So that means that when you go shopping for your fabric and you choose a fabric, if you make different choices than what we intended for the garment, you will get different results. So it's fine to experiment, but today we're going to be talking about how the choices you make when fabric shopping can influence the fit of your garment. So I have a bunch of examples here on the table for you to talk about different types of fabrics. So the top row is all non-stretch wovens, the middle is stretch wovens, and then the bottom is all knits. Oh, and another important thing to realize is that fabrics generally, how we describe them, there are 2 words, right? 2 components to the term. There is the fiber, and then there is the weave. So for instance, this is a cotton poplin, right? And cotton is the fiber, and poplin is the weave or type of fabric it is. Okay, so this is a cotton poplin without any spandex woven in. So you can see it does not stretch at all. It's pretty firm. We're gonna get more into talking about drape too, because that's another important part of fabric and fit. But for now, let's just talk about these different types of fabric and what they look and feel like. The second one is a Liberty of London cotton lawn. You know I love Liberty. Very similar to the poplin. So again, cotton is the fiber, lawn is the weave. No spandex. Now these are two silks, okay? I wanted to bring you some different fiber contents. So this is a silk taffeta, and you can see it has some iridescence to it. It's very crisp. And the iridescence, this is an interesting fabric fact. The iridescence comes from having two different colors of threads woven in either direction. So remember we talked about the basket weave earlier. So to get an iridescent effect, you could do purple threads in one direction and blue in the other. And that's how you get this like depth of color and the iridescence to it. This is a silk dupioni, so similar in its crispness to taffeta, but it has a different texture to it because of the different weave. So it has these slubs, which are a sort of signature of dupioni, is the slub texture to it. But again, no spandex woven into any of these, so you can see there's no stretch. Now these are both wools. So this is a wool twill, and I wasn't really sure until I picked it up, but the reason I could tell is that it has these diagonal lines here, and twill is a diagonal weave, so I know it's a twill. It also has some fun embellishment to it with these little tufts and lines of stitching on the top. So it's a fancy wool twill, but still a wool twill. And you can see the texture comes from that tufting on the top there and the diagonal weave, which you might not be able to see on the camera, but it's there. This is a wool tweed, and this is a Harris tweed, which is a very special type of tweed. You can tell that it has a sort of like fuzzy texture to it. And this plaid is actually what's called a woven plaid because these are actually different colored threads that are woven in that like basket weave pattern to make the pattern of the fabric. So it's really cool. If you kind of take it apart at the sides, you can see that there are yellow threads, red threads, and that's what forms the plaid pattern. All of the fabrics in this top row, like I said, have no stretch. So just bringing the conversation back to fit. Anything that you make out of these types of fabrics, you're not going to get any give or ease through the fabric. So let's say you make a tightly fitted bodice, like the night and day bodice, you know, very 50s style, slim fitted bodice. It's going to fit very firmly, right? You're not going to get any give through the fabric. So that is an example of how this would affect the fit and why we would recommend something like a woven fabric for the night and day dress. Next, let's talk about stretch wovens. So again, you have your two words to describe the fabric, right? Let's look at this one. This is a cotton twill. It has the diagonal weave texture to it. It's made out of cotton, but it is a stretch cotton twill. And this is a pretty stretchy cotton twill. We were actually surprised when we used this to make the white dress, the Elvis themed version of the Las Vegas halter top dress with the rhinestone embellishment. We used this fabric and it affected the fit of the dress quite a bit. It was bigger than it would have been in a non-stretch fabric because of the extra give that the spandex blended in provides. Okay, so in something like the Las Vegas halter top, you would need to take in the side seams or go down a size. You have two options. Okay, so you can see the amount of give that this fabric has. And just important to note now that there are two-way stretch fabrics and then there are four-way stretch fabrics. So two-way means it stretches sort of like east-west, right, around the body, but it does not stretch vertically. If this were a four-way stretch fabric, it would stretch in all four directions, okay? And we'll be talking about those more when we get to knits. This is a stretch denim, and we use this to make a version of the Maryland jeans. So denim is cotton is the fiber, and then denim is the weave. Okay, denim is actually a twill weave, so there are subcategories here too. So this is a stretch cotton denim, and you can see it has a little bit less stretch than the white cotton twill did. It doesn't stretch quite as much, And that's because Lycra can be blended in different percentages into wovens. Lycra, by the way, is the trademark term for spandex, so I use those interchangeably. So you can, when you look at a stretch fabric or stretch denim, you may see that the description tells you how much stretch is, or how much spandex is blended in. So for something like this, I would guess it's probably about 2% spandex woven into the denim. For this, I would guess it's more like 3 or 4 or even 5%. Okay, so that's a different stretch percentage than what we're going to be talking about later. That's the spandex percentage in the fiber content. Next, let's talk about knits. So knits are the second big category of fabric. First we have wovens, and now we have knits. And like wovens, knits have a very specific structure to them. So instead of that basket weave structure, knits have a structure that looks like this. Okay, so if you've ever done any hand knitting, you know exactly what a knit stitch looks like, except that it's very tiny because these fabrics are knitted on very intricate machines to create very little loops. But if you've ever done any hand knitting, you know what the stitches look like. And if you look really closely on a knit fabric, you can see those little, they're like interlocking loops, the knits and the purl stitches, okay? So again, like wovens, big category here with subcategories in it. And just like wovens, the fabric you choose is going to affect your fit so much. If we draft a fabric for knits, you're going to know it because we're very specific about saying, you know, like the Barbie top, this is for knit fabrics because we draft everything smaller because knits inherently have stretch to them because of the way they're created with those loops, the knits and the purl stitches, okay? But within the knit category, there are what I think of as 2 subcategories. You have your stable knits and then your unstable knits. So I have rearranged my swatches here, and we have more stable knits on the top and then less stable on the bottom. So I'm going to give you a few examples here. This fabric is a Ponte, which is a type of double knit. Now, a double knit means that there is a front face and a back face of the fabric, and it's like 2 layers of knit fabric put together, which of course means it has more stability just because of that extra layer in there. Now, you can see there's not a ton of stretch to this Ponte, and it's almost similar to those stretch wovens in terms of the amount of stretch it has. And I've even heard in the past that you can substitute something like a double knit for a woven or a stretch woven. So there's a little bit of gray area here. This is a pretty stable Ponte knit. It does not stretch in the vertical direction, okay? And again, you'll have your fiber and your weave or type of fabric. So I believe this is like a rayon poly Ponte, okay? So you can have blends of fibers too, so we didn't talk about that, but blends of fibers. The second fabric is a cotton interlock. An interlock is one of your most stable jerseys. It's something that like you could make a t-shirt out of. It is just cotton. It doesn't have any lycra woven in, but it does stretch because it's a knit weave structure. Okay, so you've got a little bit of stretch here. In the vertical direction, just the tiniest bit, just because of the structure of the knit stitches, there is going to be just a little bit of vertical give, but it does, I wouldn't say that this has 4-way stretch. But you can see fairly sturdy. Third, we have a stretch velvet and a fabulous leopard print. We used this to make gloves out of recently. So you can see that this is a little more stretchy than the previous 2. This does have lycra blended in. So like wovens, knits can also have lycra blended into the fabric to give them more stretch. And this one, just a little, again, just a little bit of stretch in the vertical direction, but I wouldn't call it a 4-way. We have less stable knits on the bottom. This is a stretch nylon tool. Again, we use these for gloves. So you can see it stretches quite a bit in this direction. And then this is a 4-way stretch because it also stretches quite a bit in the vertical direction. This next fabric is a rayon jersey, which has a ton of stretch. Look how much stretch we're getting on that in both directions. So this is definitely a 4-way knit rayon jersey, and I believe it does have Lycra blended in. Now, this fabric, I have to tell you guys, is probably the stretchiest fabric I have ever worked with. We wanted to make a Barbie top out of this, and we just substituted the fabric, and this is a great example of where fit comes into play. Just substituted the fabric thinking we were gonna make a Barbie top out of this rib knit. Look how much stretch this has. It probably has like 150 to 200% stretch, all right? So it like doubles itself and then some, right? So when we made the Barbie top out of this fabric, I was swimming in it. Even the sleeves got longer, like everything about the fit changed. So you make a Barbie top in a Ponte versus this fabric, you're gonna get a totally different fit. So this will fit close to the body, and it may not even have enough stretch because it's a pretty stable knit. You go all the way to this direction and it's gonna have way too much stretch and it's gonna be really big. Okay, so those are your knit fabrics, stable and unstable, and how they affect the fit. You may be wondering, okay, but how do I learn about fabric, right? It's really tough now because there aren't a lot of fabric stores in smaller cities. We normally have to travel to big cities. We always go to the garment district in New York City to source our fabrics. So if you don't have access to those kind of fabric stores, how are you going to touch and feel and learn about fabrics? So you have some options. First of all, I would say the touching part is so important, okay? We all have experience with ordering a fabric online, thinking it's gonna be the perfect thing for our next project, and then you get it and it's totally different from what you thought and it's not gonna work, right? So it's so important to touch it, to see how much stretch it has. In lieu of, going to a fabric store, you could order swatches online. A lot of sites provide swatching for a small fee, $1 or so a swatch. So you could start to build up a collection of swatches of your own. Also, anytime you order yardage, save a swatch, build up a binder. This is what you do if you go to school for fashion, for costume design. You have to build up a binder of swatches so that you learn about fabric. So, make a note for each one, handwritten note. This is cotton poplin. If it has stretch, how much stretch does it have? Make notes for yourself so that you can build up a reference library. Now, that all sounds like a lot of work, right? There is a shortcut. There are swatch books that you can buy, which are really handy. This one I really like. It's called Fabric for Fashion, the swatch book. It costs $90, which I know is, a big ticket item. But they've done all the work for you. There are, I think they said 125 sample fabrics in the book. So you actually get to feel each fabric. Cotton denim, cotton bark weave, cotton moleskin. They've got a lot in here. They have stretch fabrics, and then they describe each of the fabrics too. So this is really an invaluable reference if you don't have the time or the resources to go swatching in a store or buying them online. So just thought I would mention that as an option because this can be really, really valuable. So we have talked a lot about how stretch in a fabric will affect the fit of the garment, right? So you make the same pattern in a fabric with more stretch, it's gonna fit looser. Make it in a fabric with no stretch, it's gonna fit a lot closer. So just there, you're gonna have a lot of variance in fit using two different fabrics. But the next factor I want to talk about that affects fit of a garment is the drape of a fabric. So this is also often referred to as the hand. And this literally means how does the fabric drape when it is on the body? Okay, so there are fabrics with more body, which would be something like a quilting cotton, right? A lot of people caution against using quilting cottons for garments, and I'm not necessarily one of those people because I feel like quilting cotton has a lot of structure, a lot of body to the drape, but you can make that work in your favor, right? If you're making a 50s dress that has a structured bodice and a really full skirt that you want to stand out, that's a great opportunity to use something with a lot of structure to the fabric and less drape. So you can see when I'm holding this and this is how I kind of test the drape of fabrics. I will get in front of a full-length mirror, I hold up, at least a yard of the fabric like it's a dress or a skirt and see how it falls. Okay, so quilting cotton, this Batik quilting cotton is a great example of something with more structure, less drape. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, rayon. Rayon challis has a ton of drape to it. So if you just pick it up, you can see how it has this very like liquid look, and it falls very close to the body. Now again, you can manipulate this to your advantage. Let's say you're making, a 30s bias cut gown. You want something like this kind of drape. You don't want quilting cotton. So this is where, fit comes in. You try to make that 30s bias cut gown in a quilting cotton, and it's going to look really boxy, and you're not going to be happy with how the fit looks on your body. You use something with the right amount of drape, like a rayon challis, and it will look fabulous on. One of the most common questions we get here at Charm is, can I use a different fabric from what you've recommended for my project? So, for instance, we've drafted it for a woven. Can I use a knit? We've drafted it for a knit. Can I use a woven? Can I use something with a different amount of drape, a different amount of stretch? So the answer is maybe, but it is going to affect your fit, right? We're all about fit today. So let's look at a couple examples. First, we have something like the Rita blouse. The thing is, people have asked me for a long time, can I make the Rita blouse in a knit? But it was designed for a woven fabric. So they asked me so many times that I got curious to try it out, and I did a ton of testing. I thought about what type of knit fabric I would use. I tried ones that were more stable, right? So more like that interlock style of cotton knit. And then I just tried it out and experimented in the studio. And what I found was that we had to make like 10 changes to get it to work the way the original pattern was intended. So things like taking in the side seams like extensively, changing the construction to the point where we eliminated the zipper, changing the stitches you use. So I wrote a blog post about it, and we will link you to it. So we used the studio as a test kitchen to try that out and tell you that yes, this can work if you do these 10 things and use this type of fabric, right? The thing is, when people ask us commonly about, can I use a different type of fabric for this pattern than you've recommended, is we haven't done, that extensive testing. So we don't really know. But I do encourage you, if you're curious and you think something could potentially work, go for it. Do your own test kitchen experiment and try a different type of fabric, make changes to the fit, to the construction, and see if it can work. And then you can write a blog post. I will say there are sometimes questions where I would say, no, I wouldn't try that, right? So another common question is with the Jasmine jumpsuit, which we designed for a drapey high stretch knit. We get a lot of questions like, can I use a structured non-stretch cotton for that? So those two types of fabric are very much on opposite ends of the spectrum. And I would say they're so far apart from each other that I wouldn't try it. Mostly because I just don't think you're going to get the fit that you want. First of all, it's going to be too small, right, in a structured cotton without stretch. Second of all, the drape is going to be totally different. So think about the gathers at the ankle cuff and at the waist in the Jasmine. Those are going to be like boxier and bulkier if you do them in a more structured fabric than in a fabric with drape. So this is all to say that we get that question a lot, and sometimes it's something you can experiment with and we encourage you to. Other times, if it's just too far off in the spectrum, it's really not worth trying because we can pretty much guarantee it's not going to work. But maybe you've proven us wrong and you've tried that, so do let us know. But next we are going to talk about stretch percentage and how do you figure it out and how do you determine how much stretch your fabric has. Next, we're going to talk about how to determine the stretch percentage in your fabric. So I know I've talked about this in videos before, but I'm excited to do it again today because the 4 fabrics I have here are the 4 fabrics that we made samples of the Bryant gown in. So in the next upcoming chapters of this video, I'm going to try on all these different Bryant gowns and you can see how stretch percentage affects the fit. So let's talk about how to determine how much stretch each of these fabrics has. Okay, first of all, we have this cotton batik, which is a quilting cotton. And I can tell just by going like this has zero stretch. It is not giving whatsoever. So we can safely say no stretch, 0%. Next, we're going to look at this Ponte fabric, this dark purple. So this is a rayon poly lycra blend Ponte, which is sometimes called an RPL, by the way, if you ever see that. It's rayon poly lycra. So we are going to test the stretch percentage on this. I know that this is a stable knit, right? Pontes are more stable knits because of that double knit structure that we talked about earlier. And also, like we talked about earlier, you can often exchange stable knits for stretch wovens because they sometimes have a similar stretch percentage because they are low stretch knits. Okay, so keep that in mind. So let's test out the stretch percentage on this fabric. You're going to grab your handy dandy gridded ruler and you're going to take exactly 2 inches of your fabric and make sure that you're testing the direction with the most stretch, okay? Because some fabrics have more stretch in the horizontal direction than in the vertical direction, right? So you want to make sure that you're testing the horizontal direction, which will go around your body. Okay, so you're going to grab exactly 2 inches from the 0 to the 2 on my gridded ruler, and I'm going to stretch it as far as it will comfortably go, okay? I don't want to like tear into this, but I do want to stretch it about as much as I would imagine it would stretch as I'm wearing it, like the max, right? Okay, so this goes to about 2.5 inches. So with my stellar math skills, I know that that means this has 25% stretch. Okay, so this is on the lower end of stretch fabrics. Now, we picked these 4 fabrics to be in a sort of increasing stretch percentage range. Okay, so the next one's going to have more stretch and so on. This is a stretch woven, believe it or not, and this is a good example of how stretch wovens can have more stretch than stable knits. This is a really interesting stretch satin that has a ton of spandex blended into it. Remember earlier I was saying sometimes denim would have like 2% spandex blended in? This has 7% spandex, everyone. So that is a ton of spandex and it's going to give us a ton of stretch. So we're going to do the same thing going from the 0 to the 2, stretch as far as we can go. And this is going to about 2.75 inches, which would be about 37.5% stretch, okay? So that's quite a bit more than the Ponte, even though this is a stretch woven and this is a knit. So always good to test these things out, even if you think, oh, this is a woven, it'll have less stretch than a knit. Not necessarily true. Okay, and then on the stretchiest end of the spectrum of things that we're trying out today, you may recognize this fabric. It's the Lurex spandex from the Jasmine jumpsuit, okay? And this is a high stretch fabric. It's the type of like activewear spandex that you would use for leggings, swimsuits, that kind of thing. So we're gonna do the same thing here. This is a knit, obviously, very high stretch knit. We're gonna go from the 0 to the 2, stretch, and look how much further that stretches. This goes to 3.5, so that means this has 75% stretch, which is what is usually recommended, again, for things like leggings and swimsuits. So this is a very high stretch fabric. Okay, so that's how you would determine the stretch percentage on different types of fabric or any type of fabric. And next, I'm really excited to show you, we sewed each of these fabrics into a cocktail length Bryant gown, and we can show you how differently they fit based on that stretch percentage. Okay, so I am trying on the Bryant gown. This is the cocktail length version with the flounce with the lantern puff sleeve. So like I said, we've made this in 4 different fabrics of varying stretch percentages and drape so that you can see the difference in how it fits. So this fabric that I'm wearing now, this is a cotton batik, and so it is a quilter's cotton, you know, it's a broadcloth. So like I said, a lot of people say not to use quilting cotton for garments, but I think this is the ideal fabric for this design. We chose the Bryant gown for this little experiment because it has so much structure to it. It has princess seams and fisheye darts, and then a slim skirt to really give a very sculpted torso. So this pattern was inspired by a vintage gown that I own, designed by Alfred Shaheen. And the original gown was in a structured cotton, no stretch, a tropical print. And ever since I tried it on, I just love the fit of it, how it transforms your body. And so I knew that when I did the samples, I would have to do a similar fabric. So for our first test here, we wanted to go back to square one, use a cotton batik, no stretch, and see the effect of the dress. So as you can see, we get a lot of definition through the torso, and when putting this dress on in this fabric, it really does almost feel like you're putting on a corset in a way, because it really like molds your body, it squeezes you in a little bit, and the dress shapes you with the fabric. So it really highlights the use of those princess seams, the fisheye darts. The other thing I really like about this fabric for this dress is that it defines that sweetheart point. You know, you can get a nice crisp point there, whereas in some other fabrics, which you will see in our next test, you can't get quite as much crispness with the fabric. Also, this sleeve is one of my favorite sleeves we've ever done here. It has a shape where it kind of goes out and then back in through the shape of the pattern. And using a very structured fabric really highlights that shape. So other things that I think work here are that the neckline is fitting the way that it should. It's not stretching out, it's not falling down. This is a special neckline, I think, because it really, through the use of elastic, it sits like right on the edge of your shoulders and it doesn't fall down as you're wearing it. So you can see the neckline fits tight to the body, even though it's a slightly low neckline. And then what else do we have to say? It's slim through the hip, which is great if you're going for that vintage mermaid silhouette. You know, you want something that's not going to be baggy throughout the hip and thigh. So I think that this highlights that shape. And then overall, I mean, I think that this is a really great fabric to make this dress in, but like we've been saying throughout this whole episode, you can make other choices. So I'm excited to show you our next test, which will be in a Ponte knit. Okay, so here I am, same dress, everything about it is the same size, no alterations made. And this is the Ponte knit with 25% stretch. And also worth noting that this fabric has a lot more drape than the cotton batik we just looked at. Now, in this pattern, in the fabric recommendations, you will see that it says we do not recommend using a knit fabric for this pattern. Now, I think if you're going to get away with any knit fabric, it would probably be this one, this Ponte knit, because like I have said in this episode, you can substitute some more stable knits for stretch wovens. And the next fabric we're going to use has even more stretch than this, even though it's a stretch woven. So this has some stable qualities to it, of course. But I do think that it's not fitting exactly as intended, right? You can see that this one is sliding off of the shoulders because of the amount of stretch in the fabric. Even with, we still put the facings in there and the interfacing. So it has all the same stability or stabilizers as the batik version, but it fits bigger. Like you can just feel the difference, even if you can't see it as much, but you can definitely feel it on your body. So it's definitely sliding down. You're not getting that effect on the off the shoulder look here. And also, I hope you can see how this completely changes the shape of the sleeve. So we're not getting that cool lantern effect. We're getting sort of like a deflated, I don't know what it is, a deflated pastry effect. So it's like not looking so great, like it just came out of the oven and it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. So it's just looking a little deflated. And then in terms of the rest of the fit, I mean, I definitely could not do this with the batik version. So you can see I have a lot of extra ease in here. I mean, does it look terrible? I don't think so. If you want more ease in your clothing, there's no reason not to wear this, I think. But, you know, does it fit the way the sample photographs look, for instance? The other thing you can probably tell is that it's not looking as slim through the thighs and the hips here. So you're not going to get that very like slim mermaid silhouette. The big thing that was like super apparent is that it's just got all of this excess in the back especially. So just a lot of fullness around the torso instead of getting that very sculpted look. Now, if you want to use a Ponte, I would say you can, but I would recommend making some fit changes. You could definitely take in the side seams. You might need to take in those center back panels and maybe even consider going down a size so that you can get the neckline to fit a little bit closer, and even consider doing some more stabilizing around the neckline. But overall, you can see how this is just fitting a little bit differently than the pattern intended. Okay, next version. This is the high stretch woven. So this is a satin with 7% Lycra in it, so a lot of stretch. And I just want to point out that satin famously shows every little lump and bump. So hopefully you're seeing all the fit issues in full detail here. So I will say the great thing about this fabric is that it has structure to it, right? So we're seeing a fabric with more structure like the batik. So you're getting the shape in the sleeve. It's really standing out. You're able to get that definition at the V point. But it has so much stretch that it's replicating some of those issues that the Ponte version had. First of all, the shoulder, like this could just keep creeping down all night if you were wearing it. And then once it starts creeping down, you start to get folds here, right? So it starts to show the fit issues in other ways. Now again, like the Ponte, this has a ton of ease in it. You know, it's interesting, I don't know if you can see it that much in this dress because of all those the shaping darts and the princess seams. It still has a relatively fitted look to it because the dress does so much heavy lifting in terms of the patterning. But it's still, you can really see all the excess ease here. You can also see that the stretch is kind of causing it to drag away here at those fisheye darts. So you're getting a lot of pulling because of the stretch. And then again in the back, we're seeing a lot of excess here. So overall, I would say this is pretty similar in fit to the Ponte version. You could definitely make this dress in this fabric. I would say you just need to make some adjustments. You may remember that I made a pink Bryant top last Halloween in this fabric in pink. And I ended up just omitting the zipper entirely because you don't even need it because there's so much stretch in this fabric. And then taking in the seams quite a bit just to get a more fitted version of this. But the structure of the fabric is really good. And I would say you probably need to take in the neckline a bit too, just so it doesn't continue to creep down your shoulders. But it's definitely possible to make it in this fabric, but you are going to have to do some work and the adjustments to get it to look like the photos if that's what you're going for. So last but not least, or maybe it is least, we have the spandex Lurex fabric, the 75% stretch jersey. So hopefully you can see this is literally falling off my shoulders because of how much bigger it is here. Also, we weren't really able to get any sort of point here because jersey, just this kind of spandex jersey just does not lend itself to any kind of crisp corners or anything like that. So you can still see the folding here because of the drooping issue. It's much bigger around the arm, which means the entire sleeve is falling down. Now, other things are that because this is such a soft fabric, this is the facing right here. You probably can't see, but the facing is actually rolling out of the dress because it just doesn't have the structure to stay inside the dress where it's supposed to be. So again, the darts are doing a lot of work to make it look like it's fitted, but you can probably see just how much room I have in this dress now. Also, in terms of drape, this has so much drape and that liquid look like we talked about with the rayon that we're really not getting any definition in the flounce. It's like the saddest flounce ever, right? So we're just not getting the shape there. So the other thing is, again, there's just like a ton of excess fabric in this dress just because of that extra stretch. So just looking back to the Batik version, like I can't even grab a little pinch of that because it is so fitted to the body. And here you could see that I could take in multiple inches to get it to be that fitted. So, you know, hopefully this helps you see how much the stretch percentage and the drape changes the fit of a dress and the look of a dress. And really just getting back to, not even is it too big, but do you like how the garment looks on you? Do you feel like it reflects the photographs that we took? Does it look like the same garment? So following the stretch recommendations, the fabric recommendations will help you so much to get a bit closer to the original intent of the design. However, as we talked about today, you can also switch it up a little, you can experiment, you can make changes in the pattern and the fit and the construction if you're going to use a slightly different fabric. But maybe don't go so far outside of the range that you're using something with 75% stretch as opposed to 0%. So there it is, voila. Okay, everyone, that is it. I hope that you loved the topic for this fit clinic, looking at how fabric choices affect the fit of your garment. So we've gone over a lot today, from Textiles 101 stretch percentages, and we did a fun little science experiment, so I hope you love that part, looking at the Bryant gown in 4 different fabrics. We've got a couple more fit clinics coming to you this year, so please do let us know what you want to see next. I have a little bit of an idea what some of the requested topics are going to be, but I would love to hear from you. And I just want to thank you all, as always, for being patrons and supporting the work that we do here. And I can't wait to see what you've been sewing. Don't forget to tag me. All right, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.